From the moment humans first set sail on the open ocean, stories of ghost ships and sea serpents dragging sailors to the depths have spread. Retold and relived in our heads, these myths have the power to strike fear and awe in us all. Persisting for centuries is one such myth: the Bermuda Triangle. Since the time of Columbus sailing to the Americas, its legend has only grown, as has the body count and disappearances. With every new dark tale told, the mystery tightens its hold on our imagination, as we desperately try and explain the seemingly inexplicable. From ancient gods to modern conspiracies, we've been explaining away the unknowns of our world throughout all human history. I'm Jordan Ferguson, and you're watching See It First. Join me as we explore the Bermuda Triangle myth, hear the incredible stories and mysterious tragedies, all while pulling back the hidden curtain. By the end, we'll have separated fact from fiction, tracked how myths are born, spread, and survive, and exposed the forces that keep them alive. We've all seen the old maps with images of terrifying creatures and heard the tales passed down through centuries. Stories from ancient Greece speak of sea monsters and whirlpools. Norse legend reveres the Midgard, or god serpent. The Bible talks about the Leviathan. And many more myths circulate from all over the world. Since humans began, these myths have appeared, demonstrating a strong collective fear of the unknown. Imagine being one of these early sailors tasked with traveling across the dark and deep expanse of the ocean, with no clue as to what lay beneath. There were no maps, no satellites, just the stars in the sky to guide your way, and treacherous water for miles and miles ahead. From this uncertainty, a fear is born. Thalassophobia, the fear of deep water. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, when the only way to travel and explore was by water, there was a very good chance that you'd never be seen again. During those times, insurance companies often reported as many as 1 in 4 vessels being lost. We know now that the cause of wrecks was typically to do with the weather and the ocean's geography. But without this knowledge, people needed answers, and thus legends were born. Warnings of the very real dangers captured within fantastical stories. The kraken, serpents, and mermaids took the place of freak waves, shallow reefs, and hurricanes. Early seafarers were superstitious. Anything at all, however illogical, that could tip the scales in their fight to survive was grasped and venerated. A simple example is to do with the albatross. When you're weeks from land, a large seabird appearing near the ship can feel like a message from the world beyond the horizon. These huge birds are native to the northern Pacific and Southern Ocean, and were believed to carry the souls of sailors. Were you to interfere with one, you would bring down a curse upon yourself and your crew and would never make it back home. And so, albatrosses were revered and would be carefully looked after if they ever landed on a ship's deck. Ghost stories were commonplace amongst those with lives at sea. The Flying Dutchman was said to be a phantom ship that would sail the seas forever and spell trouble for any who encountered it. The story is likely rooted in a real phenomenon that's known as a fata morgana. During specific conditions, when there's a layer of warm air over a layer of cold near the water's surface, light can begin to bend. This has the effect of making objects appear stretched, transparent, and hovering above the horizon. It makes a ship appear ghostly. So it's no surprise that these ghoulish legends would spread. As humans, we have a deep-set need to understand things. In the absence of facts, we create stories and fables. They help teach important lessons to children and give peace and closure to those who have lost someone. As these tales spread, they take on a life of their own and can grow to become known the world over, such as in the case of the Bermuda Triangle. One of the earliest stories to emerge took place in 1609. The Sea Venture was the flagship of the London Company, responsible for colonizing a large stretch of the east coast of North America. This vessel was a part of the third supply mission to the Jamestown colony and was laden with supplies and hundreds of people to support the colony's growth. On the transatlantic crossing, a new route was used because the tried and tested path had become impractical after the Spanish had taken control of most of the West Indies. So the Sea Venture led the flotilla across the open Atlantic, with the aim of going directly towards Jamestown. This turned out to be a terrible mistake. Just a few days away from Jamestown, a storm struck the fleet. One of the ships sank immediately, and the Sea Venture was separated from the others. Its sailors battled the winds for 3 days. And during this time, they faced a rather strange phenomenon: St. Elmo's fire. In storm-charged air, electricity can ionize around the tips of a ship's masts, producing a strange blue-violet glow. We now know the scientific reasons for why this happens, but the crew of the Sea Venture certainly did not. Water soon began to pour into the ship, and with everyone doing their best to keep afloat, the only option was to try and find a safe harbor. Fortunately, they were passing St. George's Island, which is now one of the main islands of Bermuda. This was a place that already had the nickname the Isle of Devils, because of reports of the storms and strange sounds heard at night. It was uninhabited, as no one would risk the dangers they believed were there. In the end, they found it to be a rich, healthy, and pleasant place with plenty of water and food. This supported them enough that many were able to continue their journey to Jamestown. But soon after, stories of their experience began to spread. Witnesses spoke of the strange lights they had seen, the eerie sounds, and ferocious storms. Despite the fact the island had saved their lives, Bermuda became a place to be wary of. The stories of the devil's association with the island spread. This idea that it was a cursed place is likely to have laid the foundations for the development of the Bermuda Triangle legend centuries later. Myths are conflated stories that become a part of culture over time, but are normally based on actual events. When a ship disappears without a trace, or an aircraft goes missing with no explanation based in fact, we turn to alternative ideas to find answers. This is exactly what happened in 2014 with the loss of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. Within days of the incident, the theories arose. A hijacking, it was sabotage, a military cover-up, even supernatural explanations. Uncertainty is hard to live with. A story, even a wild one, feels better than not knowing at all. Air travel is something that millions of people do each day. To keep feeling confident in flying, we need to blame a cause, no matter how outlandish it might be. Even if the truth is discovered, the legend surrounding it will have already taken hold. In the case of the Bermuda Triangle, anything strange that happens in the region can simply be written off as yet another unusual event in this mysterious place. Myths that spread need an emotional connection. Stories that prey on our fears spread quickly and will be embellished with each retelling. Storms suddenly become clear skies, reefs become monsters, and soon a story seems to be impossible. The more it spreads, the more it becomes seen as fact, even if the current version is very different to eyewitness accounts of the actual event. Have ships and aircrafts gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle? Yes. Have these happened at a higher frequency than you tend to expect in a region prone to storms and with volcanic features like seamounts beneath the surface? Empirical evidence provided by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says absolutely not. As with any story, it's important to have a good hook. The Bermuda Triangle certainly sounds like something enticing and mysterious. It's a term that was first used as recently as 1964 in an American magazine called Argosy. This followed 20 years of articles suggesting that something unusual was happening in the region. The loss of 5 US Navy torpedo bombers in 1945, 2 passenger airplanes in the late 40s, and various other ships and aircraft all cemented these suspicions. Some stories can become so embedded in the minds of people that even later logical explanations won't shift their belief. Once the region was named and people had a perception about it, something called confirmation bias came into place. This is when you actively search for data that supports your theory. People started looking back into history, and events all the way back to the 17th century were then brought in to prove the idea. The triangle's borders are loosely defined and are often expanded so they can take in further incidents that happened nearby. Statistically, there is still no definitive proof that events are more likely to happen there than anywhere else. But this isn't a myth that's unique to this one place. To the south of Japan, there's a region of ocean called the Dragon's Triangle, or the Devil's Sea. There have supposedly been a number of mysterious disappearances, ghost ship sightings, and electromagnetic anomalies tracing back hundreds of years. Sound familiar? The oceans are vast, and were far too deep to explore for most of human history. A wreck could easily be erased in very little time, leaving an empty vacuum for myths to appear. That's partly why the Bermuda Triangle has become so linked with mysteries. Some areas contain the deepest part of the entire Atlantic Ocean, the Milwaukee Deep. As part of the Puerto Rico Trench, it reaches almost 8,751 meters beneath sea level, and only one crewed vessel has ever been there. The underwater geography is complex. With signs of historic volcanic activity, there are vast underwater mountain ranges that could pose obstacles in the right conditions. The region also experiences strong currents such as the Gulf Stream and is frequently struck by powerful storms. These all increase the likelihood of an incident and will then wash away any trace of what's happened. Salt water is notorious for its ability to increase the rate of decay of metal and wood. The presence of marine organisms further speeds up this process. This all means that there's a very short window of opportunity to find any wreck or debris. When nothing is found, people begin to make up stories to explain it, and a myth is born. There's a famous story about an event that took place in the Bermuda Triangle and is a great example of how these legends develop. In 1881, the Ellen Austin was a sailing ship that was traveling through parts of the Bermuda Triangle. During its journey, it encountered another vessel. The captain of the Ellen Austin tried to make contact, but there was no response. He decided to get closer and realized that the ship was floating aimlessly on the current. To his surprise, they then found that it was abandoned, with no crew members on board. Not wanting the ship to be lost, and with the hope that the mystery might be solved, the captain ordered some of his crew to sail this vessel back to port. At this point, there are two versions of the ending. The first is that the abandoned ship never made it back after being lost in a storm. And the other is that it was found a few days later with all of the new crew missing as well. It's a story that has been used as proof that the Bermuda Triangle is a cursed place, and one that has all the elements that you'd want to hear. A strange ship, missing crew, and violent storms. It's also often told as absolute fact, but there's a problem there. While there are records of a ship called the Ellen Austin, there is zero evidence and no written accounts that they ever discovered a ghost ship. In history, stories of abandoned ghost ships crop up again and again. Subsequent retellings of the story in different publications then went on to add further facts to make it even more interesting. It's an example of how the press spin a strange event into a gripping tale. The kind that sells papers, fills columns, and keeps readers coming back for more. When people started looking for evidence to support the idea of the deadly Bermuda Triangle, there was a single powerful story from 1918 that provided everything they needed. In March of that year, the 165-meter-long USS Cyclops was traveling towards Baltimore, with almost 11,000 tons of manganese ore in its cargo hold. The ore was vital for the war effort, as the material was needed to produce munitions. This urgency meant that the ship had been overloaded at the start of its journey by as much as 3,000 tons. No stops were scheduled, but it did dock in Barbados for checks before heading towards its final destination. And then, it was never seen again. The first signs that something had happened came when it did not arrive on time, and within a few days, it became clear that the USS Cyclops was lost. The mystery of the vanishing ship made headline news across the country, but no trace was ever found. Speculation ran wild, with the added possibility that it had been victim to the enemy action during the war. But there were no German records of seeing the ship, let alone attacking it, and the official explanation was far less newsworthy. It's believed that the ship was simply carrying too much weight, and that the manganese ore can become slurry when it's wet. If this happened during a storm, it would have moved around in the cargo hold and changed the distribution of its weight. A recipe for disaster in bad weather. It was such a big incident that people preferred to tell tales of the alternatives, with theories like German attacks, alien interference, or mysterious forces. Later versions of the story mentioned that the ship was unsinkable, that the conditions were perfect, and that there had been several sightings of the vessel before it simply vanished. None of these claims can be corroborated, but that doesn't often matter to those hearing them. When people started writing about the Bermuda Triangle, this became one of the main historical events that they pointed towards as evidence. Still, can you blame them? It's a difficult thing to accept. Surely a ship that big doesn't simply disappear. In many ways, our progression into the modern era would be expected to explain many of the strange disappearances. In the case of the Bermuda Triangle, new technology actually started doing the complete opposite. The mystery surrounding Flight 19 may well be the strangest of all. In 1945, an aircraft group made up of 5 Avenger torpedo bombers set off from Florida on a training exercise. The particular drill that they were performing was a simulated bombing mission and had already been conducted by other flights. Their flight leader had more than 2,500 flying hours in aircraft of this type and was a veteran after serving in the Pacific during the war. Radio communications were constantly monitored, so it's known that the first phase of the flight went to plan. It was after they had dropped their bomb successfully that things took a turn for the worse. No further communication was heard until around an hour later, where a garbled message seemed to mention malfunctioning compasses. The flight leader was given instructions, but failed to follow them, and further messages were heard that suggested that they had lost all navigational ability and were becoming increasingly distressed. Radio contact became worse as bad weather moved in, and the last words that were heard from Flight 19, "It looks like we're entering white water. We're completely lost." One of the most common stories you'll hear about the Bermuda Triangle is that it's a place where there are electromagnetic anomalies and that navigation can be tricky. It's this event with Flight 19 that those stories began with. The fact that the radio transmissions were heard and were crackling further supports the idea that there's something mysterious about the region. It plays into our fears of becoming lost at sea. While perfect for the creation of stories that will grip people, the facts paint a different picture. So what really happened to Flight 19? Unfortunately, there are reasons that pilots go on training missions, and that's because sometimes things can go wrong. There was clearly a navigational issue, where the pilots didn't know where they were. Compounded by malfunctioning instruments in the developing storm, by the time they had found their bearings, they probably didn't have enough fuel to get home, so had to try and find somewhere else to land. It was a tragic accident, but not one that's unique to the Bermuda Triangle. Air forces around the world have experienced similar events in their own airspace. It's an unpalatable truth about the risks we all face in life, and it's sometimes easier for us to believe in a fantastical story instead of the cold truth. There are plenty of strange events that take place around the world. So why do some lead to the creation of myths that go mainstream? The answer to this can help explain why false stories spread so quickly today. There's no denying that traveling over large and remote regions of the ocean is potentially dangerous. And the region covered by the Bermuda Triangle is particularly vast and deep. Anything lost there will likely never be found. And this makes it easy to find historical records of missing ships and aircraft. And those that make it back always have strange stories to tell. The decision in 1964 to call it the Bermuda Triangle gave it a marketable name. This gimmick then became a representation for all that we don't know about the oceans. As the publishing world began demanding new and interesting stories, the 1970s saw an increase in the amount of material being written about the triangle. Soon, it made its way into popular culture, and it's probably the reason why you know the name in the first place. By the time experts were able to disprove the theory with actual facts, the belief in the myth had already reached critical mass. We now know so much more about the reasons behind incidents in the Bermuda Triangle, and why they're no different to anywhere else. In modern times with social media, it's far easier for stories like this to spread quickly. The algorithms that decide what we see will judge a story based on how interesting it is instead of how truthful it may be. People prefer to engage with an exciting and mysterious story. If it's presented as fact, it doesn't take much for them to start believing it. Modern-day beliefs, such as the flat Earth theory, can be traced back to similar mechanisms that led to the creation of the Bermuda Triangle myth. There's just something about the human mind that wants to believe in the fantastical. So what is it about us that allows this to happen? our brains have developed to seek out patterns and explanations for the world around us. We're constantly filtering new information, searching for danger, and trying to fit everything into a neat mental box. If the only available solution is something extraordinary, it's at least preferable than an unanswered question. And we're also a species that loves stories. We use them to learn, and we use them for entertainment. We're not so good at knowing the difference between the two. The original intent of a myth or fable is often forgotten, but the joy of the story remains. In consequent retellings of the story, the boundaries between fact and fiction become even more blurred. Belief makes us part of a community. The sailors revering albatrosses, the online group sharing evidence that they've collected. It's all the same thing. It's part of what makes us such social animals. The truth of the Bermuda Triangle is that disappearances here don't happen any more often than anywhere else. What does exist is a perfect storm of ordinary danger, sudden squalls and hurricanes, busy shipping lanes, shallow reefs, human error, mechanical failure, and the Gulf Stream itself, a fast-moving current that can scatter debris and complicate searches. Then add in the fact that the place has no official borders and that the reported numbers are often vague or exaggerated by the media. Instead of just being a hard truth about the dangers of our oceans, the Bermuda Triangle can represent something else too. Our fear of the unknown and our need for answers. These stories help us cope. They give us something to hold on to when the real answer is messy or missing entirely. They help us comfort each other and move on when the truth is simply we don't know. And it's not just myths. We tell ourselves smaller stories every single day to make life feel more predictable. If we get rejected, we say, it wasn't meant to be. If we miss a flight, we call it a sign. Not because we're all delusional, but because it turns chaos into something we can live with. It's not bad. It's not a lie. It's not truth. It's human nature. Think about it. When you don't know why something has happened, do you accept the uncertainty? Or do you reach for a story that can explain it all away?